I'm here because Rowan's story is one a lot of people don't think about. They were not a drug user. This situation was accidental from what we can tell. And that's happening all too much now. And the more people of all ages, because it's affecting people of all ages, can understand how persistent this use of fentanyl is, I think the more chance we have to save some lives. Rowan was born Genevieve Elaine Ethridge. When they graduated from college, they changed their pronouns from she, her to they, them. They were non-binary, and they selected the name Rowan. They have a lot of respect for nature, and there was just something special about the Rowan tree that attracted them. A lot of people, when they talk about their loved ones who have passed, are very emotional. When I talk about Rowan and I'm talking about things that I remember, they brought so much joy to me. We did so many wonderful things together. They were such a wonderful person. We had so much fun, and that's what I remember. That's what comes through. There's a saying, it's not the dates on either end that matter. It's that dash in between that matters, that life that was lived. And they lived theirs to the ultimate, and they taught me so much. And I just consider myself so blessed that they shared 27 years of their life with me. And not to say I don't have my days where I am just completely falling apart because I can't see them anymore, and I know there's no more memories to be made, but I think I'm very lucky in the perspective that I currently have. For me, it's more of experiences that we shared. For example, at Easter, we always decorated eggs together. And Rowan would bake Easter bread, braided bread that would have the eggs in it. But we always decorated eggs together. Always made sure I took Friday off work. And every summer we would order peaches and set aside a couple of days to just stay in the kitchen and make fresh peach jam and peach hand pies and that kind of stuff together. And those are the days that are really, really hard, because I'll never do that with them again. I couldn't bring myself to dye Easter eggs this year. I did place my order for the peaches, and I do intend to make peach jam. And I hope that I can continue to do that in their memory every year. She was very authentic, believed very much in not pretending to be somebody they weren't, or somebody that other people thought they should be. And they had no qualms about that. That was the way they lived their life. They were the kind of person that lit up a room when they walked in. Everyone who met them loved them. After they passed, we had Facebook posts from people they had known in high school and in college, not even very well, but who just said, Rowan was the only person who really made me feel at home in class or in theater, or, they just welcomed me with open arms. They loved people unconditionally. They loved to sing. They had a beautiful voice. From high school, they were in choir and musical theater. When they got to college, they realized that, they always wanted to pursue theater, but they realized they were really more interested in technical theater and pursued a career in lighting, electrical, and scenic design. And they were passionate about it. It was just great listening to them talk about anything new that they learned or some new experience or a new project they were working on, because they were really passionate about the things they were able to do and portray through lighting. They were the kind of person who always had either a snack or some cash on them. Because I worked in Baltimore and D.C. a lot. And they would frequently pass, people who were living on the streets and asking, for help. And if they didn't have something on them that they could provide, they'd, take them to the nearest 7-Eleven and buy them a hot dog and a drink.
She was 27 years old, had just graduated from college, and was just starting her career as a theater lighting designer, and also would run lights during a performance. Her career was really starting to take off. She'd only done a few shows, yet everyone was ranting and raving about the quality of what she did. And everyone on all the casts, the crew people, all loved working with her. She was very well received, and they admired her professionalism for someone who was starting out young. Now, of course, she'd been performing in community theater since she was 14, maybe even younger, and had been in several performances. She loved getting out and finally working and being in demand and being complimented. Any person would. She was very happy. I thought it was a professional life. Personally, she was also an adorable person, very creative. She, at about the age of 24, suddenly decided to start painting and did a whole series of pictures that, frankly, I found amazing. And when she felt like it, she'd sit down and crank one out and experimented with different media on the board. She was really enjoying that. She was good friends with anybody. Most people adored her, is the best word I can use. We had over, I think it was 120 people of hers come to the funeral, and they were all just shocked at her death. She was poisoned, not a user, not addicted. We don't know the exact circumstances of how she wound up ingesting something with fentanyl in it. All we know is that she had been working on a technical week, working up to a performance in rehearsal, and was there late. And the last communication we had from her was to a friend of hers where she was going to spend the night. And it was, I'm on my way. Nothing after that. And the next morning, when we got up, we got a call from a doctor's appointment she had that morning, and they were asking, where is she? We said, we don't know. We presume she overslept. That was unfortunately something she had a lot of trouble with. And so we kind of, okay, she overslept. And then in the afternoon, about 1 o'clock, we got a phone call from the person that she was going to stay with the night before. And he was asking did Rowan make it home? And the answer, of course, was no. So we immediately jumped in our car and drove up to where she was that night. That seemed our best course of action. And my wife started calling the police, asking, was there any road accidents? Was anybody taken to the hospital? All those kind of questions. It was all coming up, no. So we got to the theater, and we drove around it once, knocked on the door. There was nobody there at that time. It was now probably about close to 3:30 in the afternoon. And we didn't see her driving around the block once, but when we came around that time, I said, if I were her and I forgot my glasses or something at the theater, how would I have gotten back to the theater? And we just went down the street. I said, she'd skipped that first turn, because that's probably when she realized she was missing something. And then we made the next turn, which there was only one turn after that you could take, and found her in her car. Seat back, blue lips, blue eyes. She was gone.
We didn't hear from her. We were trying to reach her. Finally, we heard from the friend whose house she was supposed to stay at that she had never arrived. So we drove out to the theater. We knew where, she had told us where she normally parked her car. It wasn't there. And so my husband just started kind of driving a circle around the theater. And about a quarter mile away, so we were going around a corner, we saw the car parked alongside of residential street. And we knew. And the windows were up, the doors were locked, her seat was reclined, and she looked just like she was asleep. You know, if it wasn't for the blue lips and the blue fingernails, you'd think she was just asleep. And of course, at that point, we had no idea what happened. We noticed that her glasses were missing. And given where we found her, we are assuming that she had to wear them to drive, but she'd always forget to put them on. So we assumed she forgot them, and she was circling around to go back to the theater. That was the route that she would have taken. She had lupus, and we thought maybe something physical happened, and, you know, something happened, and she got tired and had to lay down and whatever. It wasn't until after the funeral and, you know, we got all the medical results back that we found out that she had passed from fentanyl poisoning. And the worst part is we don't know what happened, and we'll never know what happened. She wasn't a drug user. Her friends are all flabbergasted because they were like, she would never take something from somebody if she didn't know it was like the real thing, you know, like it came from CVS or it was prescription. And the only scenarios that run through her head is, you know, she would get migraines, she'd get anxiety attacks, she always forget to bring her meds with her, and her meds were not with her. Or, you know, it was really late at night after a really long day, she had a half an hour drive ahead of her, and she was feeling really tired, and maybe asked somebody for something that would help keep her awake. And she made a bad decision and took something she didn't know the provenance of, and it turned out to be tainted with fentanyl. It was just a bad mistake. It's not something anyone would have done purposefully. But we'll never know for sure, which is the hardest part, probably.
that was a little rough. The police were very surprised we found her, which I didn't think a big deal of it. I was not very happy finding her like that. And we pulled her out of the car and did CPR until the crew arrived, and they basically pronounced her at the scene. And it was rough after that. My wife and I, of course, had a crying jag right at that moment when she was pronounced, and went home and had a very rough time. We now had a hole in our lives that was going to be very difficult to fill. I mean, basically, we lost a piece of sunshine, literally, in our opinion. It was very rough. Now, like I said, we don't know how she wound up ingesting. The only thing we can figure is she'd been working late all week, driving to another theater to do work at the same time during the day. She might have had a headache. She might have started a migraine. And she asked somebody, does anybody have anything? And whatever they gave her was laced with fentanyl, and it killed her. The police were a problem in that they assumed automatically that she was a druggie and had overdosed. And we pushed at them, are you going to talk to the cast, talk to the crew, see if you can find out who gave her something? And their reaction was pretty much, nobody's going to admit to that, because that's essentially admitting to murder. And they wouldn't do anything because they had no evidence, that they wouldn't believe us that she was not a user. And even we questioned and went back to her friends and said, we need you to tell us honestly. And they said, no, she was definitely not a user, because when they would use, she was the one that would fuss at them. You got to stop doing this. This is a bad idea. And so that made us believe she was actually poisoned, not just buying a bad product and dying from it.
They saw something along the side of the road that they called a popper. It's evidently a drug that's in a capsule, and when you pop the capsule, you then inhale whatever it is that's in it, and it gives you a high. Now, some neighbors had seen another car in the same spot earlier in the evening. The officer who was there made the immediate assumption that it was hers. Rowan had a mohawk. She dyed her hair. So she had, that unconventional look about her. And we could just tell that it was like, it's just another overdose. No concern. Didn't bother even trying to interview anybody from the theater, because they're like, well, nobody's going to admit to anything. It was crazy because we told them, she had texted her friend on her phone at 1:15. We had the time. And then never heard anything. And they didn't find a phone on her, but they never said anything about it. We finally found the phone when we called the medical examiner's office about something else. And they went and double-checked where her belongings had been, and they said, oh, we have a phone here. The police had no idea. We were wondering, where is her phone? The police knew she had one on her, but never, it was crazy. So we got no support at all. It was just, there's one more. We've got too much stuff to work on. Not enough information to go on.
There was one mystery associated with her death. We could not find her glasses that she needs to wear when she drives. They were not in the car. They were not in the theater. what happened to her glasses. Now, her phone was another issue. It was locked. So we eventually found a security company in, it was either Texas or California, that would go through and unlock the phone to great expense. But it was a very complicated procedure to break the phone and give it to us. And there was absolutely nothing on there that would indicate any contact with a dealer, asking someone for drugs, nothing like that at all. Matter of fact, an oddity about the phone, what we found, was her pictures that morning when she left to go to the job were all of like the house, the local scenery, kind of like she was trying to capture memories of what the place was like, which was not usually what something she did. So we found that very unusual. But my daughter was very unusual. We're all unique, but some people are unusual. There was absolutely nothing else in any of the message threads, not on her Facebook page, nothing. And we looked at everything we could get into. There was one Substack on Reddit that we couldn't get into, but that seems like an unlikely place to make drug deals. I don't know, but I wouldn't think it would be because it's kind of public.
And all of her friends were in absolute shock because they're like, if there was anybody who would not take drugs, it was Rowan, because she didn't like not being in control, especially at night, because she hated to drive at night.
There are a lot of parents that have no clue their kids are using drugs, and they're not necessarily bad parents. It's just kids are smart, they're clever. And she was an adult. If she'd worked at it, I wouldn't be surprised if she could have hid it from us. The one telltale thing that would have been a red flag was how she spent her money. She didn't have much money yet. She was just starting her career. I think she'd had 3 or 4 jobs of working on theater. You are hired for an interval when you work theater. It could be a couple weeks because you're setting lights up, you're designing, you're going to meetings, those kind of things. And then you're there for the actual performance. And once the performance is over, you're done. And so she didn't have a lot of money yet. And that would have been a real red flag if she kept asking us for money. One problem was we didn't get the toxicology report back for 2 weeks. And it had listed on it that she died as an addict. And those weren't the exact words, but that was basically what it said. And we had a fight with the detective and the medical examiner. And eventually we convinced the medical examiner who sets the cause of death to change it to, it didn't say basically she was an addict. Accidental poisoning, I think, was the phrase. I'm not absolutely sure. I don't remember. That was kind of a painful memory.
I don't like not having answers. And, just the conversation we had about the police response just leaves me infuriated that they would just make an assumption that this was another addict and not be worth their time. And I want to be able to support fentanyl awareness. And it's difficult because I have a story where I don't know what happened. Some people can say they know they got a Xanax from a friend and it was tainted, or they know that, they had just bought some mushrooms and they took them and they ended up being, or something. All I know is there was fentanyl in her system. And she was found by herself several hours later in her car. And no one knows anything. And that's really hard. It doesn't do me any good just to stay angry at the police, because the only one that hurts is me. It doesn't hurt them. It just hurts me. I'll get angry at whoever gave it to her, but I know in my heart they didn't give her something on purpose. That, again, if it was something that they got over the internet or something they got off the street, they probably assumed it was perfectly fine. Because no one, you talk to anybody that she worked with at the theater and they loved her. I mean, she only knew them for a short number of weeks that she worked on the project, and the messages and Facebook posts and everything else that we got from folks were just blew me away with how much they loved and respected her. So that's what I try and remember.
My wife is very sad. She'll have days where it's difficult for her to work. She's been slowly getting better, but we're coming up on a year. But there were days she just couldn't work. She was too depressed, crying. I mean, it really rips a hole in your soul when you lose a child, particularly if it's such a bright, vivacious child, and that you truly, truly loved. And I found that for a long time, I didn't want to do anything. Fortunately, I'm retired. So if I needed to grieve, I had time and space that I didn't have to worry about a job. She was blessed in that her workplace, they just told her, if you need to take off, just do it and tell us. So she was really blessed by that. But even so, I mean, we're coming up on the anniversary of her death, June 8th. And my wife has planned a butterfly release where we're going to have a bunch of our friends over for a light party and going to let loose butterflies because she loved butterflies. I think I'm slowly beginning to accept her death. Doesn't mean I don't grieve, but I can walk past it and keep it there, keep it contained, keep it safe. I'm not really suppressing my grief. It's just I'm letting it flow through me would be the best phrase. And, you have your moment where you're wondering where she is, what she's doing. And then you take a breath and put your mind back to a positive moment, a good memory. Whatever it is, it can be little things. Like one time sitting down at dinner and some comment she made at the dinner table, or just her sitting in a chair reading. Those kind of parental moments when you think of your children. In many regards, I almost treat it like, since she's now, she was an adult, that she'd moved out and had a boyfriend, was married, got her own apartment, whatever it was. Parents, I'm sure, have to deal with that. It's not quite the same as when your child dies, but it's similar. You have a time you have to get used to. They're not there. Now, I'm a person who believes in the afterlife. I have no problem with that. I've seen things that convince me it exists. So to me, she has just changed from here to wherever there is. And I know she's alive. I know she's fine. She's just not here. That also helps as a viewpoint when you have grief, is to look at it as she's just moved on.
I very much believe that death is a physical thing and that our soul continues. So I very much believe and have had experiences that Rowan's still with us and keeping an eye on us and rooting us on, and I feel her with me every once in a while. So I miss the physical, but I haven't lost her. And I mean, it's, everyone believes something different, and that affects how you deal with things, but that's just my perspective.
Talk to your children about drugs, of course, but I think the game has changed in that parents need to tell their children that fentanyl is now in any street drug they buy, or you can buy. It's always there. And the technology that the gangs are using is the chocolate chip cookie problem, where you might get a bite of cookie that doesn't have a chocolate chip, or you get the chocolate chip that's enough fentanyl to kill you. My daughter had 10 times the lethal amount of fentanyl in her blood. And that's, there's no coming back from that. So I would say to them, really emphasize to your kids, it's in everything now. And you just can't experiment. It's a one-way trip. And they really, if they love their kids, need to take the time to really find a way to communicate with your children about it.
I think the takeaway for people watching this is our kids, our adults cannot take anything for granted when it comes to street drugs or other medications that are not prescribed. I think there's a big problem in people not being able to get prescriptions that they need, like Xanax or some other things. So they go the only route that they know, which is to get it somehow off the street. And I mean, there was just an article in the New York Times, I believe it was yesterday, that said Baltimore is the largest, if I get this right, the largest center of fentanyl and opioid deaths in the entire country. And the police have told us, you can't get anything off the street that doesn't have fentanyl in it. Marijuana, cocaine, everything's got it sprinkled, because if it doesn't kill you, it increases the high, which means more business. And kids especially, but people who are struggling, I mean, everybody just has to be aware. This, it's not your father's drugs. It's not what I grew up with. It's really, really dangerous out there. And don't mess with it.